Greetings, folks. Nice to see you. My name's Dustin Cormier. Welcome to another episode of How to Rock Astrology. Today, we are going to be reading from Pluto, the Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. We're going to be reading in particular about what it's like when your natal Pluto is in the sign of Taurus or in the second house of the natal chart. Now, the sign of Taurus is quite different from the second house. The houses and signs are quite different things. The main point being that whatever is the second house in your chart, if your Pluto is in the second house, you have to consider whatever planet rules that sign as a very important indicator for the strength of Pluto. It's the lord of Pluto's sign. Whereas if Pluto is in Taurus, the main thing you're focusing on is the fact that Venus rules Taurus. So Venus's placement will tell a lot about how you deal with Pluto being in Taurus. To be fair, Pluto being in the second house, you would also have to consider the strength of your Venus, as well as your moon in a way, in order to define and discern how Pluto is going to do, how well Pluto is going to do in that second house. Because the second house relates to attraction, our natural, unconscious feeling that we have the resources and abundance that we need in order to attract the reality that we seek at a domestic resource level. If you have a good, strong Venus, if you have good relationships with your lovers and your family, and you have close friends close to you who you lean on for a constant active transmission of emotional coolness and foundational security. If you have that in your life, then Pluto will do much better in the second house as a manifestor of wealth, as a manifestor of security. This theme of emotional and financial security is obviously going to be a deeply important thing to you as someone with this placement. So all the things related to that, your second house lord, Venus, Mercury in some ways, even Jupiter in some ways. In Vedic astrology, Jupiter is a foundational part of the second house. So take that with however many grains of salt you wish, but all the things that relate to your capacity for a feeling of unconscious abundance, your early childhood experiences of your parents loving you and giving you the nurturing that you want. All of these things will be reflected in the health of your second house and as well as Pluto. And if they're all doing well, if you are doing good with all these things, then what Pluto seeks has some doorway for the creative juiciness, for what you need in order to use this Plutonian energy constructively. If you don't have this security, if you don't have an emotional security, if you don't have a family close to you, then you're probably playing on the other side of Pluto, which is that it's difficult for you to gain these things, and this life is calling you to deal with that difficulty. Some of you may be in the middle. In any case, Pluto in Taurus and in the second house is going to make the realm of second house financial security, emotional security, sexuality. All of these things will be important themes in your life, whether you like it or not. This can make for some slutty people, and this can make for some asexual people. Usually the healthy thing is to find a balance somewhere between these two. Now, sexuality can come from many different placements, including 8th house and scorpionic things. But we're talking about Taurus as relates to self. And this is the theme that we're going to unfold in our reading today. So that was my own little spiel here as an introduction to what we're talking about today. Now we're going to let the man speak himself. This is Jeff Green talking about Pluto in the second house or in the sign of Taurus. I hope you guys enjoy. So, beginning on the first part of this chapter. Pluto in the second house, or Taurus, indicates a prior evolutionary desire and need to develop self-reliance and self-sufficiency. Sorry, you'll notice my My roommate is tuning the piano downstairs, so that's why you'll hear all those extra sounds. Sorry about that. Pluto in the second house, or Taurus, indicates a prior evolutionary desire and need to develop self-reliance and self-sufficiency. In the broadest sense, Taurus in the second house correlate to physical and biological survival of the human species. Just as the species has learned to survive physically by identifying the resources necessary to accomplish this survival, such as learning how to make fire, so have these individuals with Pluto in the second house or in Taurus. They've learned how to identify their own personal resources to sustain themselves. Those with Pluto in the second house or Taurus have an extra strong survival instinct as a result. From a biological standpoint, these people have a very strong sexual nature because a function of survival is to reproduce the species at that biological species level. So there's a deep psychological imprint of this conquest of the procreative instinct. Whether that goes into actual procreation and having kids and just having sex, or whether that's at an energetic level, attracting partners, attracting attraction and magnetism, and birthing it as the ease of bodies interacting naturally and well. This doesn't mean that you have to have kids as someone with displacement, but the feeling that energy is being birthed from your interactions, alchemically positive interactions with other people, are birthing more ease and energy in your life. That could be what this procreative instinct is metaphorically coming through as. I digress. These individuals with Pluto in the second house and in Taurus, these individuals come into life with an emphasized need to survive and sustain themselves on the physical and therefore emotional plane. They will come into this life with a natural self-reliance and self-sufficiency. In prior lives, they have been learning over time how to identify their own personal values and needs in order to develop these qualities of self-reliance. Whereas with the person with the first house Pluto, or with Pluto in Aries, they had to initiate action and experience in order for self-discovery to occur, to tap into the primal mystical movement in the spirit. Now the second house Pluto having evolved and progressed into the second house of the soul, the second house Pluto individual has needed to withdraw into him or herself in past lives and will naturally gravitate to experiences of withdrawal in this lifetime. By withdrawing, these individuals have internalized their conscious focus in order to discover their own values and needs from within themselves. By remaining rooted or fixed in themselves, these individuals have experienced, sensed, or discovered their own essence as contrasted with the changing flux of circumstances around them. There's the world outside of you that's constantly changing, but what of yourself is being left? What is your essential self? Even all of the cells in our bodies get purged out. All the deepest parts of your bone marrow eventually get washed out after about 9 years or so, they say. And after 9 years, every piece of atom in your body has been flushed out, but yet you are still essentially yourself. What is it about the changing snake skins of your consciousness as you shed and grow to become who you are supposed to be? What is the essence within all these changes? By being rooted in themselves, these individuals, you, are experiencing what is essential to yourself after all the snake skins have been shed. As a result of this process, this is an interesting one. These individuals, you, Pluto in the second house, you commonly come into life with what Jeffrey Wolf Green calls the frog in the well karma. In other words, the frog in the well has identified a small piece of the sky, that which it can see from the bottom of the well. Furthermore, the frog has identified this small piece of the sky as the entire universe. The frog, of course, is quite secure and safe in the bottom of the well. In the same way, these individuals with Pluto in the second house, they come into this life with a limited vision or knowledge about themselves and life in general. This limited vision is known, familiar, and secure. Thus, there is a reliance upon this limited vision because it works. This reliance upon the past can create an inertia or laziness and a limited vision and a resistance to jumping out of the well of the familiar sense of what the self needs to grow into. The degree of resistance and limited vision is relative to the mitigating factors determined by the signature of the main karmic and evolutionary dynamic in each birth chart. How well the person is attuned to Pluto, how well the person is attuned to Rahu, to transformative experiences, how strong their Saturn is, as well as how strong their Mars is, how well they can sustain the elements of their physical reality while they push through the psychological challenge of the idea that there might be a reality outside of themselves, outside of this limiting frog in the well view. It's going to take a few factors to be able to pull them through the transformative experiences that would allow them to see past a good enough status quo material world survival reality. Because these people might just think that surviving well enough is good enough and might skip out on the thriving that is supposed to be a part of their life experience. So as an example, Jeffrey Wolf Green gives us an example. If the south node is in Gemini, the degree of resistance and limited vision will be less severe as contrasted with the south node in Capricorn. Because the south node in Capricorn, the person can be used to, from past lives, having a more conservative mindset that would keep them in this limited frame of mind. Now, Jeffrey Wolf continues. Relative to physical survival, those individuals in a herd state of evolutionary condition tend to identify material values as a vehicle to self-sustainment. So they have these material values, and if you're in a herd, if you're not the most evolved person with Pluto here, then you might think that you might identify material values as a vehicle to your sustaining yourself. You need materialism, working a job, kind of slaving at some level, grinding your teeth on some mill in order to sustain yourself. And you won't be able to do it without that. We can see the implied limitation here. Others in the individuated... So that's the herd state. Now, a person in the individuated evolutionary condition who's becoming more self-aware and can include their own karma and spin it in a way, and they're interested in not just taking their karma wholesale. They're a little bit more willing to play with it. Others in this individuated evolutionary condition, who's not in the herd mentality but is coming aware of themselves, they're learning to identify themselves as the resource creating the means to self-sustainment. It's not the materialism of the world that you've been born into. It's yourself that has the power to create and sustain. Which means that ego can come about. This is the more Rajasic in the middle. This is more that I have to put the power in myself to attract what I want. It's not quite the sattvic. It's not quite the spiritual perspective. Those in the spiritual or universal evolutionary condition, the highest state in Jeffrey Wolf's reckoning, have learned that the source or the universe provides that which we need in order to sustain ourselves when one is receptive to that provision. These people commonly isolate themselves from the environment and others in order to concentrate upon their relationship to source. It can make for a strong meditative internal wealth and attraction and ease production just based simply on one's own ability to tap into the source within themselves, if they're in that spiritual evolutionary condition. In all cases, limitation is implied. For those who have related to material values as a means for self-preservation or self-sustainment, the limitations are the values themselves, what you consider as a value in the material world. So this is the unindividuated herd state consciousness. The material needs and desires for these individuals can be a bottomless pit because they believe that physical security brings emotional security. Relative to the fear of loss intrinsic to Pluto, there's a subconscious fear of losing or not having enough material goods, especially when there's economic fluctuations in the world. That's just the way the world is. And when there's an economic flux in one's local economic commerce, this person will be like, duh, oh no, there's less abundance for me now. Because they're relating that sense of abundance to the fluctuations of material in the physical world. Possessions and money equal power to these people because of the status that is implied in material wealth. Some of these people are not beyond manipulating the possessions, resources, or money of others in order to gain or bring the security for themselves that they subconsciously seek, that they sublimate. Because it's almost like the person that says, if I survive, I'll give it back to the universe. It's like, I need to kill my brother in order to live. But if I kill my brother in order to live, that's okay, because as I live, as I go on, I'll make it back, pretty sure. I have to do this. This is just the way nature is. People can get into this kind of crazy mentality. So these people are not beyond manipulating the possessions, resources, or money of others in order to gain for themselves that bottom line of Plutonian foundational security. Others in this state, the unevolved state, are not beyond forming vicarious relationships to situations or people who represent or are the embodiment of this kind of power and status. In other words, some of these people have identified that they have these needs and desires to have security, yet they're too lazy to make the necessary effort to create the resources for themselves. It is easier not to do so, as the way Pluto is, you have to do something, but it's easier not to do it. Instead, these people form vicarious relationships to others who have such resources, and these people then become extensions of that person's identity and values. A small percentage of those that manipulate the resources of others to gain those resources for themselves. They've used very devious or underhanded tactics in order to do so. A small percentage of those who have made minimal or no efforts to actualize their material needs may live beyond their means, driving the fancy sports car they cannot afford, charging the limit of their credit cards, going into debt. Individuals who have made the necessary effort to actualize their material needs can accumulate vast sums of money and possessions due to the concentration, Pluto, upon the desire and effort. A Plutonian obsession with these things, properly committed to a conscripted and ethical and earnest formula for getting that which you obsess about, can bring incredible power in this regard. Pluto, once it finally has a system to channel its energy, could actually give material prominence and wealth in the sense of having the resources that the person needs. Although you're always going to need to play some kind of game here in order to get to that place. And basically that game is that it should not be for you. If you try to hold on to it and accumulate it at an egotistical, this is mine level, the universe will somehow play on it so that you will hold on to it desperately, and the Plutonian energy will pull it away from you in order that you could learn to live to be okay with the internal symbol without needing the external symbol. Once the external symbol of money, wealth, power is not looked at, I don't need it anymore. What matters to me is unfolding my own sense of connection to the spirit and the source within myself and within the universe. Once you start tapping into that, the material physical world wealth will be allotted to you. It's like a tricky game. It's like when you want a lover so bad that you psych yourself out and you throw up and you get butterflies every time you're close to them. But then if you go on and you get another lover and they're better or something, or they've got more, you get with that lover, all of a sudden you're on top, and the energy that you show to that other lover is all of a sudden real and coming towards you. Anyway, it's like you see what I mean. It's this weird catch-22. The only way to have wealth is to have it come from behind you, from with not even trying. That's when you bring it. So I digress. That's the law of attraction stuff is very second house, you know. But I'm going to keep reading from Jeffrey Wolf because he's the one we're here to listen to. So our last thing we said here was that those individuals who made the necessary effort to actualize their material needs, they can accumulate vast sums of money and possessions due to the concentration upon the desire and effort. So this is putting in the efforts to gain the material possessions, not just trying to whitewash it with false driving the sports car when you can't really afford it. You put in the effort to get it. Now, with Pluto's being in Taurus, or the second house, the polarity point being in the 8th house then, in Scorpio. So since the polarity point, the evolutionary integration point here is in Scorpio, or the 8th house, the evolutionary intent will lead this person, the second house Pluto person, it will lead these individuals into intense internal and external confrontations. Such confrontations will reveal the limitations implied in their value systems, in how they have learned to relate to themselves, and how they have identified the nature of their personal reality, the frog in the well. How have they identified the nature of their personal reality? For those who have amassed wealth, the shock of confrontation will involve the realization that material abundance does not equal happiness or internal emotional security. The 8th house and Pluto itself evokes or symbolizes the awareness of deeper levels of reality, that there is more to life than material values. Those who used devious means to obtain wealth will be haunted to their graves by a gnawing sense of guilt. Guilt would serve to shine a light upon upon the internal motivations leading to this situation. Guilt is telling you, why am I not satisfied with the obsessive desire for the external symbols of guilt, for the external symbols of wealth and success? I got pushed into school by my parents. I got pushed into that highest, toughest job that I could get. I finally got the car in the garage and the white picket fence, and I got everything, and now I feel guilty for having wasted something. What is it that I friggin' wasted by leaning on this obsession? Guilt serves to shine a light upon the internal motivations leading to this place in life, the midlife crisis, where all of a sudden I've wasted my life on these external symbols. Guilt is a barometer for it. This in turn can lead to deep internal shocks of self-knowledge, because these individuals have been typically unconscious of these deeper motivational forces. In other cases, the wealth may be taken from the individual in order to enforce a reevaluation of their value system. The issue of self-reliance is then experienced in a new way. The issue of self-reliance is then experienced in a new way once they start reevaluating their material values. What does self-reliance mean in that case? You know, it's like, I'm self-reliant because I slave my back off for some crappy corporation whose boss doesn't really care about me. But I'm self-reliant when I get home and I can buy my own TV, and I can pay my rent, right? So I must be self-reliant. Are they really, though? So, these individuals, having taken these taking these deeper motivational forces to work for to do whatever to get your money unconsciously, Pluto causes a rupture that forces you to think about the unconscious motivations behind these things. And then self-reliance is experienced in a new way. What does it truly mean to be self-reliant? Under some evolutionary and karmic conditions, individuals with a second house Pluto are born into difficult material conditions of lack in order to enforce lessons of self-reliance. In other cases, some individuals will be born into life situations in which there is wealth linked to the parents, but they are denied the material resources because they are not able to relate to their parents' values or cannot conform to the dictates of the parents' desires. In a few rare cases, the individual can experience the shock of imprisonment if criminal means were used to acquire the material wealth, especially their parents' wealth. They might have to deal with it. In other cases, this individual will be made to struggle throughout the entire lifetime for material security. Pluto in the second. No matter how much effort they put into sustaining themselves, prior karmic causes will dictate that they live or survive on a marginal basis. An overall evaluation of the entire evolutionary and karmic issues pertaining to the individual's past must be made in order to understand the reasons why any or all of these conditions exist in this life. An evaluation of the entire person's karmic issues in the past. This would be required to deal with this because it's at a fixed energy sign level, very deeply rooted in the person. So an unfolding of the motivations of the past lives is necessary in order to glean what parts of me are helping this agenda and what parts of these are being sucked underfoot by the obsessiveness of the compulsiveness of this agenda, of this Pluto energy. For those who have been living beyond their means, the person who gets credit cards and lives in the sports car and just keeps living the dream, the 8th house polarity, the scorpionic opposite Pluto polarity, will at some point produce shocks of repossession because of the compulsive spending patterns. If material goods are repossessed, or if the individual experiences the increasing pressure to keep making money to pay for these material goods, which are a form of bondage, then at some point the internal or external shocks experienced may produce the necessary awareness as to why they are operating this way. Again, the frog is forced out of the well and to see, that's what that looked like? Is that what I was perceiving my reality through? Once the frog gets thrown out of the well and sees how much bigger the sky is. Now, for those who have identified themselves as the resource for self-sustainment, i.e., they've developed some talent, some capacity, or some ability, some skill, some second house foundation through which they can consider themselves as the vessel for this obsessive Plutonian energy. You just put yourself in the ox's seat, my friend. Then the 8th house polarity enforces the lesson of merging with another or others instead of hauling that whole ox cart yourself. Now you have to allow the world around you, the scorpionic blending of others, the 8th house blending with others' resources. Now you have to start dealing with that as much as you think that I have to be the one to make this energy sustain itself. You're going to break yourself down if you're the only ox pulling that cart for your whole life. Especially when there's other people with other carts who can help you, who you can help each other to become a team whose sum is greater than its parts. This is a huge theme for this type of person. These individuals must open up to other people or situations through ways in which their own personal limitations and ways of relating to reality are exposed. They will have a deep sense of who they are, and they will relate to themselves and others from this more or less fixed sense of self-definition. How much of myself can I keep while I relate with these people? Oh, these people are musicians, and I'm a musician too. They're in a band, and I'm a rock musician, but these guys are reggae. I don't play reggae music, but these guys are the only band around, the only music around, the only band happening in this scene. Should I let go of my preference for my own value of music, or should I blend with this opportunity in the material world to work with other people? This attitude, so you probably have a deep sense of who you are, and you try to relate with others from a more or less fixed sense of self-definition. But this attitude not only produces self-limitation, but also personal isolation. Again, I only play rock music. I can't play reggae music. These individuals may have identified their essence, their capabilities, their personal values. But if they do not know how to implement or apply them to forces outside themselves, i.e., society and other people, then the 8th house confrontation of limitation, denial, or isolation will occur. This is like the frog who's looking outside of the well, and they've never seen any trees or any towers or any buildings. And then they hop out of the well, and they see a big building, and they say, that's not the sky that I knew. Maybe this building is like a place that can help them and help them restore their lives. But the frog says, that's not the reality that I saw when I was in the well. So that's not my way out. It's the limited conception, looking only for that piece of sky. Then once you finally get out, you never see it. You never see the dream of being back in the well because you're out of the well now. So this may be wonderful to have a natural talent as a potter, for example. Yet, if the effort is not made to integrate, apply, or link that ability to societal needs in ways that are compatible with others' value systems, it will not be possible to sustain oneself with that ability to be a potter or to be a rock musician in Jamaica where they only play reggae or whatever. Evolutionary and karmic necessity will create the effect of denying the individual's abilities to sustain him or herself relative to the intrinsic capability that they possess in order to do so. Pluto, you son of a bitch. Such impossible extremes. How do we make them resolve? Individuals now with a spiritual focus. This is somebody who's no longer considering themselves as the ox that has to pull this cart, but as a vessel for the movement of the energy that is that cart moving, summoning all that needs to be integrated and sacrificing yourself for the sake of things outside of your own comfort, your own means. This is what causes that ox cart to be suddenly have the updraft of nature and of attraction and of abundant faith in the source within myself, which is the same as the source in everybody else. When everybody else sees your cart as a vessel for their dreams, this is when your ox cart starts getting pulled from behind, from the universe's acceptance of you as a channel for its means. So, the individuals with a spiritual focus must learn to open up to new rituals, new techniques or methods that allow for a further deepening of their spiritual commitment. They must also learn to share their spiritual resources with others in some way, rather than living in isolation and nurturing only themselves. You have to become a bit of a bodhisattva here, come down from the mountain of your own internal yogic discipline, and bring your gifts of love, of spiritual self-understanding and wellness, to bring it to others. By opening up and sharing themselves, a metamorphosis occurs due to the implied limitations from the past. If they do not learn to open up and share, then the source, or universal, will cease to provide the material needs necessary to sustain themselves. In addition, the small piece of the universal sky that they have identified from their wells will progressively become filled with the clouds of stagnation. As a result, the deep inner core of spiritual sustenance will dry up. The resulting inner confrontation can produce the necessary metamorphosis through which these individuals open themselves up to their karmic and evolutionary requirements. In all cases, from the herd state to the individuated state to the spiritualized transcendental state, in all cases, the 8th house polarity, the scorpionic polarity, demands a confrontation with personal limits. The frog must be forced from the well to expose it to the full light of day, whether you like it or not. This process occurs by forcing the individual in upon itself in some ways to examine the internal dynamics that are creating these life situations. Thus, they are being forced out from the well to examine the larger and deeper forces at work within them. The motivational patterns and the reasons for these motivational patterns, their desires and the reason for those desires, how they've been relating to themselves, and why they've been relating to themselves in that way, what resources they've identified with in order to sustain themselves, and why those resources, and what personal values they have identified with and why those particular values. This is really breaking down the whole, what is a frog, what is the well, what is the piece of sky, what am I, What could I have been in all these lives that I've been living? And what should I be? It's a weird question to ask, because the self is eternal and it's already there. The spiritual self, the essence beyond, again, all the snake skins. But when you're in a life on a physical earth, you're asking yourself, what am I as a physical entity that needs to relate with others? I want to have an essential piece of self that I can relate with others through. What that self is gets digested, analyzed, and even questioned in annoyingly deep ways when Pluto comes into the second house, because the second house is very deeply the fixed sense of the self that was born in Aries and is experiencing physical material life on Earth. So, it's at some point, the 8th house polarity makes us question and confront the values that we have. Why do we identify with this sustainment of our resources? Why do we identify with these personal values? Why these particular values? By doing so, after a while, these individuals create the potential for a total metamorphosis, complete uprooting, to bring about a totally new way of relating to themselves, to others, and to reality in general. In this way, these individuals can adopt redefined value systems that allow for the necessary growth to occur. This natural evolutionary process occurs in such a way that these individuals subconsciously draw or attract life situations in terms, needs, This natural evolutionary process occurs in such a way that these individuals subconsciously draw or attract life situations in which they experience the limitations associated with their value systems, their needs, their self-image, and the ways that they've been relating to themselves and others throughout all this time. The personal implosion that this produces forces the individual, you, to examine all of these dynamics in order to find out why they have identified themselves in this or that particular manner. Progressively, these individuals will learn to unite their own resources and lives with others so that a personal transformation can occur, a transformation of limitations. Because of the implied inertia of the evolutionary past, changes occur slowly. Most of these individuals need to know why the change prior to making the change, which is a frustrating reality. This fixity creates the potential for internal or external atom bombs, or cataclysmic of upheavals, through which the landscape is utterly transformed, because they're holding so hard to it not transforming, and Pluto says, stop letting go, or stop holding on, you're gonna stop holding on, bang! Because of the evolutionary intent of the 8th house polarity point, those with Pluto in the second house will attract, at key times in life, intense and powerful people. Always remember that the Pluto's opposite point is its polarity point, and that's the evolutionary opposite pole that needs to be integrated with Pluto's self pole. You having the Pluto in the second house, you do obsess, and obsessing with material abundance, obsessing with having no limitations monetarily, financially, being completely, having all of your physical biosecurity needs met. It's a part of who you are. You're always going to strive for it. But if you do it so much, you will do it to the point of excess and meaninglessness. It's only by integrating into Pluto in the scorpionic sense, which is kind of Pluto's nature. Meaning, how do I be what I am without this compulsion? Scorpio means having no needs, having no material resources, and still making it through and being what I am, and pushing myself to be what I am at my best. It's that Mars dimension. So, others, since you are the Pluto in the second house person, the seventh house from Pluto is going to be other people. And others you are bound to connect with people who have that scorpionic nature. So, people with Pluto in the second house tend to attract, at key moments in life, intense, powerful, scorpionic people who embody the anchor or the thing that you're trying to integrate. These people will be timely messengers that deliver or create the necessary encounters and confrontations of your personal limitations, showing you why you're limiting yourself by thinking that all you need to be is the frog in the well seeing that small piece of sky. People will come along and pull you out of the well and say, look at what you're missing out on. These intense encounters with scorpionic and powerful people will allow this individual to experience him or herself negatively and positively in ways that they are hung up or blocked. The potential for growth exists if the individual is willing to transform and jump out of the well of personal limitations. These key people will have the ability to understand or see the source of the limitation that has blocked the Pluto in the second house individual. By focusing upon it, they can help the second house Pluto person to grow and to evolve, to relate to themselves and others in new ways, and to link themselves to new or redefined values. It's that redefined and new values is really going to deeply make this person grow, because values are the shared positives between oneself and others. And that you seek your values, and you can't seek what you don't value, especially as a Pluto in the second house person. So if you can transmute your values to meet other people in reality, you're bound to seek others in a new way. And you're bound to seek new people that were right in front of your nose all that time, but you just didn't know, because they were the sky outside of your limited framework while you were still in the well. Now that you're outside the well, you can see them and the opportunities that they can present to you. Now, these key people will promote self-effort and self-reliance in the second house Pluto person's life, rather than promoting dependency upon them. Right? You're going to meet this scorpionic person, and they're going to have power and swagger and self-reliance, and they're going to say, if you want to be like this, you got to be like me. Yourself, from within yourself. But you can't depend on me. Don't follow me. Follow the way I follow myself. That's what this person is going to transmit to you. If and when other powerful people show up in your life as a second house Pluto person who promotes dependency on them, when someone comes along and asks you to be a parasite on their self-reliance energy, then you should not get involved with them in any way. If this scorpionic person with this power, if he or she invests too much power in or gives too much power to you, either type of person, then the 8th house polarity point of Pluto will guarantee that a forced removal of that person from the individual's life will occur in order to enforce the ongoing lessons in true self-reliance and self-sufficiency. Individuals with Pluto in the second house have strong physical and sexual natures. Evolution takes place when they learn to merge and unite with another on an emotional basis, rather than approaching sexual activity in an essentially masturbatory way by using another for sexual and physical gratification and release. It should be understood that the emotional power of Pluto in the second house naturally leads to strong physical and sexual needs for these people, as well as attention needs. Again, the second house is an archetype that correlates to the instinctual impulse to procreate the human species. When this instinctual impulse is linked to self-reliance, the result will be a strong masturbatory nature in these individuals when they are not involved in a relationship. It's really this using people because you feel like the excitement energy of that masturbation or of using another person sexually stimulatingly, it'll be so natural and it'll just be an instinct, almost like a Pavlovian dog response to salivate whenever whenever you ring a bell and and the dog salivates in that thing. In the same way, you might just salivate and just have a hard time reducing or getting an arm's distance from sexuality and this self-reliance impulse. It's almost like you'll need to masturbate in order to have strong self-reliance. And whenever you have strong self-reliance, it invites a masturbatory using people sexuality instinct that can be rather gross and a little bit too cozy and connected. The natural emotional buildup of the energy of Pluto in any house demands cyclic release through that house or its polarity house in order for emotional stability to occur. If it is not cyclically released, then emotional distortion and loss of perspective can occur in all aspects of the individual's life. It's the way Pluto is. Pluto in the second house, then, demands that this emotional buildup of energy be released in physical and sexual ways. Even when these individuals are involved with another person, it's not uncommon for them to still need to masturbate anyway, because masturbation is a means through which these people ground out with themselves. It is a way to continue the evolutionary lessons in self-reliance and self-sufficiency. The point here is that this phenomena is natural for these folks, and it should not be judged nor subjected to behavioral modification. This is an important point that Jeffrey Wolf Green is making here, is that just because your self-reliance instinct is connected to sexual impulses and compulsions, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's part of the nature for these people. It's natural to these folks and should not be judged nor subjected to behavioral modification. It should just be understood that's a part of your nature. Anything can be used to excess, even your own nature. But this is a part of your nature, and there's a balance to be struck there. Very important. Don't let any Christian, sexual, asexual judgment vibes obstruct the fact that you have a connection to nature, goddess energy, the energies of the body, the energies of the flesh, the positive, bountiful ways in which flesh can be energized. These are all parts of your foundation that you ought to integrate and not just throw away for the sake of some yogic discipline principle. But it's a funky balance to find. Some individuals with Pluto in the second house have or will use their sexual emotional power to possess, use, or manipulate others. They may withhold sexual activity from another, or they may use their sexual nature to gain something from someone. In extreme cases, this can translate into notches on the belt, as these types go through one sexual partner after another. This phenomena occurs so that these people can prove their emotional and personal power to themselves. When compulsion and obsession occur relative to physical, emotional, and sexual needs, some of these individuals will become almost singularly focused upon sexual images, taboos, and symbols. Obviously, this situation implies a limitation. At some point in their lives, an emotional shock and confrontation will occur to metamorphose this behavior in emotional, physical orientation. Now, individuals who are in the spiritual or universal evolutionary state, the evolved state, must learn various rituals or techniques that use the energy of sexual union to promote a transcendence of the physical plane. Tantra, sexuality pitted to the tantric evolutionary energy field, nutriment and sustainment, for our own sake and the partnership, as well as being sacrificed so that the deep internal vision of our sexual bliss is good enough. Now we can take our excess sexual energy and pour it forth joyously by helping others, by giving to our community, by developing our jobs ourselves, doing yoga, these sorts of extracurricular, constructive sexual energies that are used for more than just the obsessive-compulsive impulse. Transmuting it. In other words, to link themselves with the appropriate techniques, methods, or rituals that teach them how to use the sexual and emotional energy experienced during sexual activity to expand their consciousness, not to root them into unconscious compulsions, but to expand their consciousness. An example of these techniques and rituals can be found in the ancient tradition of tantric yoga, which originated in Tibet. The Kama Sutra of India, and Taoist yoga techniques from China, such as Mantak Chia, for example. These are other traditions that approach sexuality in this way. Once the second house Pluto individual begins to affect the necessary evolutionary and karmic requirements of the 8th house polarity point, the results will translate into an individual who not only understands their limitations, but who will consciously make the effort to unite with the appropriate activities that will promote the required mutation of those limitations. These activities will be different in each case. Some profound internal yoga going on. The evolutionary need and theme will be the same in all cases, though, even though the specific technique or activity will be different for each person. The evolutionary need and theme will be the same in all cases. As this process unfolds, these people can become very good at pointing out the limitations and why those limitations in others, and they can suggest the appropriate means for transformation in themselves as well as in others. This is to say that a second house Pluto individual, if they learn the lessons, eventually you become very good at pointing out limitations in others and why those limitations in others can be obstructing them and you and yourself. And then you can suggest appropriate means for transformation. These people, you, Pluto in the second, can learn to merge themselves with others, to merge their resources with others, and show others how to do the same. The transformation that occurs in these merging activities will only add to what the individual already is, that which was brought in from other lifetimes. They can learn how to merge without becoming dependent upon that with which they merge. Thus, the ongoing lessons in self-reliance will occur while allowing for a transmutation of the existing limitations brought with them into this life. Evolution has been affected as a result. Self remains in its best bits, while the excess water of excess, extra, sensual, sexual energy is poured with discerning intelligence towards constructive capacities for the soul and for others. Now, this is I've just given really the whole idea of this placement. Now we're going to utilize a case file to show how Jeffrey Wolf Green would work this concept of Pluto in the second house into an example chart. Let's utilize a case history to illustrate these principles. This following individual has Pluto in the second house in Gemini. So let's just take a quick look at this implied chart. You can see here, Gemini is the second house. Sorry, I'm really close to my mic. Pluto with Neptune is here in Gemini in the second house. Mercury, Pluto's lord, is in Cancer in the third house. The North Node is in Pisces in the 11th house. And there's no Jupiter here, but we can see that the South Node would therefore be in Virgo. So Pluto in Gemini and the South Node in Virgo have a connection here. Both of these relating, of course, to the past. Pluto's present position in the second house relates to the past, and the 8th house is the integration point of the future that's trying to be brought in. Same thing here. The South Node in Virgo means mercurial nature, as relates to Gemini over here. The mercurial nature of Mercury is being the conductor of the past. And Jupiter is the conductor. Well, I guess Jeffrey Wolf Green here says Neptune rules Pisces, and that's the conductor of the future. But as a Vedic astrologer, I would contend that Jupiter would be a more primary than Neptune there, but I digress. This is our little chart. Now let's see what Jeffrey Wolf Green has to say about it. So this individual has Pluto in the second house in Gemini. The South Node is in Virgo in the 5th house. And its planetary ruler, Mercury, is in Cancer in the 3rd house. The North Node is in Pisces in the 11th house, and its planetary ruler, Neptune, is also in the 2nd house in Gemini. But it's not conjunct Pluto, mind you. I'm just going to show you this chart one more time, just so you can again see what it is that we're dealing with here. Pluto in the 2nd in Gemini. The South Node in Virgo in the 5th house. Mercury in Cancer in the 3rd house. North Node in Pisces in the 11th. So, the North Node is in Pisces, blah, 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 blah. So, this individual was in a transitional evolutionary condition between the herd state and the individuated state. So they were becoming less unconscious and moving towards an individual ego consciousness and turning into the game of sacrifice, learning that I have to be in this and that it's not my fault that my karma happens to me. I'm a part of it at some level. This person was born into the upper middle class in the United States and was Anglo-Saxon. This individual went to a university and became trained in medical psychiatry. He utilized the resources of his father to do so. He related to his father's value system and beliefs. He had a very strong drive to actualize his destiny. He sensed that his destiny was special He was very curious about the workings of the human mind and the dynamics that affected it. This curiosity, coupled with his need to serve humanity, drove him to learn about the mind from a psychiatric point of view. He became an excellent psychiatrist and was renowned for his diagnostic abilities. He wrote books, lectured, and traveled in order to teach others about his opinions concerning the psychiatric model and the drug therapies that he felt to be right. Of course, he sustained himself physically and monetarily on this basis. His major problem and the basis for the intellectual challenges that he encountered from colleagues was that he was fixed upon his own ideas and opinions. The Gemini factor there is a huge part of this reading. He was Gemini in the second house, right? So the second house has attached to the frog my limited perspective on my own reality, but that reality is Gemini, the second house, ideas. He was certain that they were right and that other points of view that did not agree with his were wrong. Beyond this, the discipline of psychology was irrelevant and misleading according to him. His need for power and recognition were so strong that they blinded him to the potential legitimacy of other disciplines or other points of view because he was so hell-bent on showing that everything was wrong, which made him feel impotent, inferior, and insecure. Nobody understands me. And of course, astrology, parapsychology, and the like were dismissed out of hand by this individual. He had opinions about everything, whether he had studied them or not. From the well of his psychiatric model, he ordered the entire cosmos to reflect his point of view. As he became older, his ideas became obsolete as others made advances not only within his discipline, but in other disciplines as well. Some of his ideas, once held in high esteem, were seen to be wrong as these advances and breakthroughs were made. He fell out of fashion, and his teaching position was lost because he was unable to change and move forward. His books went out of print as these personal shocks and confrontations mounted his own intellectual and emotional As these personal shocks and confrontations mounted, his own intellectual and emotional state began to suffer. Emotionally, he became cyclically depressed. All of his possessions and money did not make him feel any better. In fact, they made him feel more lonely and empty and isolated. As his mind dissociated from his ideas and opinions, new thoughts and ideas seemed to appear in his mind of their own accord, due to the stagnation of having held on to his own for so long. He did not know the origin of these thoughts because they were not based on his deductive thinking or analysis. These new thoughts and ideas directly confronted his most cherished opinions. He finally gave into this process and began to meditate in his own way. Along with meditation, he began to study many subjects that he would not have even considered before. Over a process of many years, he utterly transformed and laughed compassionately at others who were just as convinced about their own views as he once was. He professed the idea and philosophy of relativity in his last year and sold his big expensive house. He lived in a small apartment overlooking the ocean. He died in a chair as he was gazing at this ocean, and there was a smile of peace on his lips. He had made a final leap into the individuated evolutionary state. he made a final leap into the individuated evolutionary state, as he considered himself, the internal self, as the true fulcrum for how one defines and discerns the sense of greatness and the sense of security and intellectual security that he was seeking. Very cool, good reading. It's a good little picture of, we got to consider in that story the deep root of it, which is the Pluto in the second. Not so much the ideas, the Gemini tones, but more deeply and succinctly. This individual went through this whole experience because they were coming from a herd state where everyone else is discerning ideas about their ideas were relevant to his own feeling that he could do his own work and even not necessarily be held on to the external symbol or accumulation of so many ideas that he could possess as the sole proprietor of those great ideas. None of that mattered in the end. What really mattered is the truth of his ideas, the truth of his ability to connect with others, having ideas internally in him without the external forms, but being able to talk with people and share ideas and have their ideas become into him and him transmit his ideas in a raw, truthful way. That was him becoming individuated and saying that I don't need to hold onto any externalized form. It's already within me. So you can wax your own philosophic on how you think that story relates to these themes, but I digress. That was basically the end of this chapter. Now we've got a few common characteristics of the second house Pluto person, and then we'll show our last example charts. Some common characteristics of the second house Pluto individual include stubbornness, defensiveness, stability, and inner strength. These people are survivors. They have patience, perseverance, or laziness. They're slow to change, quietly powerful, quietly intense. They have a need to link powerful. There's a need to possess that which they think they own, or that which is theirs. Conversely, they can promote self-reliance in others and realize that they own nothing. What is possession, really? What belongs to anybody? Famous people with a second house Pluto include Henry Miller, Adolf Eichmann. Feel free to pause just to get a glimpse at Jeffrey Wolf Green's personal creation of these charts. This is Cher, but probably not the Cher that my fellow Canadian fans might be thinking of. This is Cher Bono. Anyway. Cher Bono. This is Larry Flint. And finally, we have Hans Christian Andersen. Whew, so there's lots there, lots to divulge in and digest. As usual, these videos kind of go right down to the nitty-gritty depths of the Pluto reading. Now, I have another video in this series talking about Pluto in the second house from different authors as well that you might enjoy as well. Just look up Pluto in the Second House by How to Rock Astrology and you'll find me on there, and I'll digest and go further into the theme of Pluto in the second house. For now, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys dug my reading of Pluto in the second house, coming from Pluto, The Evolutionary Journey of the Soul by Jeffrey Wolf Green. I'm Dustin Cormier for How to Rock Astrology. Let me know in the comments and stuff if you liked the video, subscribe, and keep your eyes peeled because I always got more stuff coming out. Thanks for watching, folks. I'll see you again soon.